Good evening. Jersey's government insists it's doing everything possible to protect those most at risk from coronavirus in the island.
GPs have now started contacting the island's oldest residents and those with chronic diseases to try to reduce the impact. Decisions on whether big events like Liberation 75 should be cancelled are expected in the coming days. Anna Geary is live outside Jersey's hospital with the latest. And Anna, is the hospital ready for an outbreak in the island?
Well, health bosses say the hospital behind me will be able to cope if Jersey can flatten the wave, so if it doesn't see a sudden surge in coronavirus cases. Now, they say they have empty beds within the intensive care unit already, although there was no response when pressed as to whether the hospital is keeping beds free to deal with a potential outbreak. Now, a so-called epidemic room has been set up, and the Health Minister, Richard Renniff, told me that civil servants are prepared to step into some of the hospital roles to alleviate some of the pressure on healthcare professionals so that they can focus on fighting the disease.
So we are able to ventilate 29 patients, and we have a hub which is on the ground floor of our hospital, which is most of the ground floor at the moment, and that is our hub for managing our response to the challenge of the virus.
It will be stressful within the hospital, it will look different, we will need to cancel routine stuff that we do in the hospital in order to devote resources to the emergencies. We must realise it is an epidemic. It is quite feasible that there will be fatalities, most regrettably, but that is because it is an epidemic.
And Anna, we know the elderly are among those most at risk of complications if they catch COVID-19. What's being done to safeguard them?
Well, today, GPs in Jersey started contacting those over the age of 80 and those with chronic diseases too, so that accounts for about 17,000 in Jersey. Now, over the phone, they are sort of talking about things like access to food supplies, support networks and sort of medicines, as well as their overall medical history. Now, doctors are then giving specific advice based on those individual circumstances and advising on daily routines and how people can best avoid contracting the virus.
Some patients may be advised to limit their contact with relatives who have cold or flu symptoms, and some may need to cancel their participation in community events. But it is not a curfew for them. They may still need and be able to visit the shops and spend time outside their homes. It may be an inconvenience for some islanders, but our approach is health-focused, and all the advice at all times will be based on the most up-to-date medical information.
And Anna, what more has been said about travel advice for people?
Well, there was some clarity on that matter. Essentially, the government says Jersey does not need to be in lockdown and that people who want to travel can do so, providing that they're following the UK Foreign Office advice. School trips are cancelled in the immediate future, and a decision on whether schools and colleges should close will be made in the early part of next week. Also, another decision that is due is relating to large-scale events, so things like Liberation 75. More decisions will be made around these large-scale events in the coming days.
OK, Anna, we will look out for those. Thank you very much for the update.
Well, the latest advice on who should put themselves into isolation and who can and should travel does now differ across the islands.
Both governments are taking expert medical advice but reaching their own conclusions on what action is needed. Emma Baker's been speaking to Dr Nigel Minahane, a GP in Jersey, and started by getting his view on how Jersey is approaching the outbreak.
The aim is to try and what we say flatten the curve. So in Italy what we have seen is a massive number of people. The curve has moved very steeply up and hopefully will move steeply down, but in that time the medical services have been completely overwhelmed. People will get the disease, but what we want to do is, rather than have an epidemic that moves through the population very quickly, we want to see it move through more slowly. The definition of a pandemic is when a population, in this case a global population, has not been exposed to a virus before. So to that virus we have no immunity whatsoever. So if you lock down a population and don't allow anybody to go in and out, fine, you will keep them safe. But as soon as you remove that lockdown, the virus is still circulating. So that virus will eventually go through that population. And again, it's at what speed? We would like to make that a relatively slow speed so that we can deal with the medical consequences.
The government of Jersey has given funding for GPs like yourself to contact vulnerable patients ahead of coronavirus arriving in significant numbers. That's 17,000 people. How achievable is that?
We want to do the most for the most, which is triage, and so that we intend to write to those patients, trying to personalise it to their problems and their difficulties that they're experiencing as much as possible. We will then follow that up with telephone conversations so that we can then discuss what we're doing and why, and that way we can keep people as safe as we possibly can.
Do you think generally people should all be considering restricting their travel now and their social engagements?
I think most people are making their own decisions. We're asking to allow people to make the decision, but equally to have a social responsibility, because if everyone acts in a normal fashion, we will be overwhelmed.
Okay, Dr. Nigel Monaghan, many thanks indeed for your time.
Thank you.
So that's the medical advice, but how is the differing guidance being received across the islands?
Iselin Jones has been asking people in both Guernsey and Jersey what they think of the recommendations in their respective islands and how it will affect them.
Striking a balance between the needs of business and the health of the people. That's been the job of island governments this week, and it's resulted in different approaches. In Jersey, islanders are encouraged to maintain a sense of normality, even keep up foreign travel, although government travel has been suspended. The announcement caused confusion, and this morning the Chief Minister felt the need to clarify his advice, saying based on advice we don't need to lock down, but if you do seek to travel, you should first check the current UK Foreign Office guidelines. It's in stark contrast to Guernsey's position, advising against all non-essential travel with immediate effect. Guernsey's Chief Minister last night tweeted that he'd cancelled his weekend away and, even though it was all wasted, he'd rather that than pick up the virus, knowing that if it can't be contained, our health services will not cope. In addition, Guernsey upped its community protection stance. Anyone with flu-like symptoms or a fever should self-isolate for as long as they've got symptoms and for 48 hours after the symptoms have ceased. Again, different to Jersey, where the status quo remains, and self-isolation only applies to people who've recently travelled to Group A and B countries. Some doctors have voiced concern about Jersey's reluctance to take more decisive action. Jersey cardiologist Dr. Andrew Mitchell tweeted, "Astonishing. So the government of Jersey has chosen to miss an opportunity to protect islanders from COVID-19. My advice to patients is different. Don't travel. If you're elderly, then limit social contact to essentials. Work from home. If they've got it wrong, then things are really bad." But Jersey did reach out to local business. Measures have been put in place to defer social security contributions, GST payments and rental payments where a business resides in state's property. While that's been welcomed, business is demanding more security more quickly.
We would love to see more business support. So the government have given, in the UK, have given, I think, about £3,000 per business to support them in terms of pots. We would like to see those kind of measures come in.
In Guernsey, no specific measures have been introduced so far.
In terms of helping businesses, I know that they are contemplating seriously how and most effectively they can provide some support, and I would hope that we would see some reaction in the near future.
So what about islanders? Do they feel our governments are doing enough?
Yeah, I think they're doing as much as they can, yeah.
I think we just have to play it day by day and be advised by those that know.
I think coming in and going out should be more controlled, because we don't know who you're talking to or where they've been.
And the states being the states, they've acted quite quickly, actually, because they're so slow. It usually takes them about a year.
I suppose it's on the safe side, eh?
I think they are doing quite well, to be honest, because at the moment, it's not confirmed it's spreading, so.
At this point, no one knows what course of action is the right one, or if our leaders have got the balance right. Eastlyn Jones, ITV News.
Well, on that point, you've been telling us what you think of the government's responses online. Here are just some of the comments we've had on social media. Andrea Santos posted on Facebook saying, here in Guernsey, yes, as supportive as they can.
Kenneth Rondell in Jersey says, our island deserves better, clearer communication and to see our government adopting a stronger stance now, similar to Guernsey and other countries.
Yeah, and Gavin Howe commented, I think you should ask this question in a few weeks if there's a death resulting from this that could have been prevented with sterner action.
Well, as always, thank you for all your messages. You can join the conversation by searching ITV Channel TV on Facebook and Twitter. Aurigny is relaxing its cancellations and refunds policy after Guernsey States advised against all non-essential travel.
The state-owned airline says if you're travelling in the next 5 weeks, you can change or cancel your flight and it will waive admin fees and issue a refund if you choose not to travel. Well, Charlotte Gay joins us live now from Guernsey Airport. And Charlotte, what measures are being taken there?
Well, attitudes have certainly changed to flying over the last few weeks, and we're not going to be surprised to see stations like this where you give yourself a good hand sanitizer there. But Guernsey's Public Health are now advising unless it's absolutely essential to avoid travelling altogether, and the state-owned airline Aurigny is trying to match those guidelines. If you have booked with them up until the 19th of April, that is the end of the Easter holidays, they are offering you the chance to change your booking or have a refund. But of course, for the company that has really struggled in the past with multi-million-pound losses, any kind of loss like this could have a massive impact. So they are offering people to take a voucher instead if it's at all possible. Financial losses are obviously a huge strain on the state-owned airline, but political leaders say in this time we really need to do all we can.
It absolutely is one of the consequences that we will have to manage as part of our response to this. But as I say, they already happens to be state-owned, but we recognise that there will be a significant number of other businesses that will be experiencing that cash-related squeeze as a result of the changed consumer behaviour, not least as a result of advice that you've now been given today for non-essential travel to be avoided.
And Charlotte, what about ferries?
Well, this afternoon, Condor announced that their Clipper service from Monday is going to become freight only. That service between the Channel Islands and Portsmouth. Now, they're apologising to customers for the inconvenience, but say in these unprecedented times, they really do need to be prudent with these lifeline services. So anyone who was travelling on that service will now be moved over to Pool instead. In terms of refunds, they're perhaps not quite as flexible as Aurigny. They are offering a free amendment fee for anyone who's booked up until the end of April. And you can get a voucher instead, which basically gives you the opportunity to travel all the way up to March 2021.
OK, Charlotte, thank you.
Anyone in Guernsey who needs to see a doctor about a potential respiratory infection will now be sent to the same practice in St Peter's. People should still call their normal practice, but anyone with a fever, sore throat or cough will be told to go to long-free surgery. Patients with minor symptoms who don't need to see a doctor should continue to follow public health advice and self-isolate.
We can contain, we can deep clean a lot easier, and we can institute infection control measures like keeping patients perhaps waiting in their car in the car park and being called through, making sure that we streamline things through pharmacy so patients aren't waiting in a pharmacy that other people are using. So it's just about starting this now so that when we do reach that stage in Guernsey, if there's sustained transmission, that we already have good procedures in place.
Children were sent home from a school in Guernsey earlier as 12 staff are self-isolating. L'Ivoire contacted parents and made sure students had work to do at home. They'll review the situation before a decision on reopening is taken on Monday.
Plans to raise water prices in Jersey have been put on hold due to the coronavirus outbreak. Jersey Water had planned a 2.7% increase from the 1st of April, but bosses are now delaying that rise until the 1st of June, so people aren't discouraged from following medical advice to wash their hands for longer and more often to prevent the spread of coronavirus.